The NHL playoff race is beginning to take shape. Jack Roslovic is going to miss an extended period of time with an injury, and Connor Clattenburg is making a case to stick around.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. This is my 10th season doing digital hockey content, my third as a host here on the Locked On Podcast Network, so I can approach the game from all perspectives. I want to thank everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. If you want to be in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place live NFL bets all season long. On today's edition of Locked On Oilers, we're going to talk about 3 emerging storylines coming out of the weekend. So to start out, I do think it's important that we start to make playoff expectations. We start to talk about what the playoff picture is going to look like, teams in the mix, what the current points pace is going to be, what it might need to be, where the Oilers are at. In our second segment, we will pivot to talking about how the absence of Jack Roslovic going into the not-so-distant future will cause problems for the Oilers, why he was playing so well, what his underlying numbers said about his performance, candidates to fill in his spot, and then to tie a bow on today's show, we'll talk about Connor Clattenburg's small foray into the NHL, why I've been encouraged with what I've seen, and why I think it's worth a conversation for why the kid should stick around. So to start out, we are past the quarter mark of the season. Most NHL teams have played at least 25 games of an 82-game season to this point. And that is not a definitive line in the sands. There are teams that generally do find a way over the course of the subsequent 3/4 of the season to make up for lost time. I would point you at the Colorado Avalanche last year, who looked at their situation and said, this is untenable, swapped out both of their goalies for 2 new ones, and then played really well down the stretch. I would point you to the St. Louis Blues last year, who after the Four Nations face-off, after bringing in Jim Montgomery, were the best team in the NHL down the backstretch of the regular season. So just because what's already happened so far has happened doesn't mean you don't get to do anything. I often think about that Robert Pattinson character quote from Tenet, where at the end of the movie, he's telling the unnamed protagonist, yeah, what's happened, and there's no way to change that, but that's not an excuse to do nothing. And that's the way you need to approach this if you're the Oilers, because right now, the Oilers are on pace to record just 85 standings points. I understand they have had a variety of factors implicate their issues, whether that's the goaltending, the injuries to players like Zach Hyman, who is only just getting into a rhythm, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Now we're talking about Jack Roslovic players coming in and out of injuries. Nuge came back into the lineup on Saturday against Seattle. That was encouraging to see. But the Oilers have a number of factors working against them. And with all of that said, they are beneficiaries of the fact that the NHL standings in both conferences, more so the East, but in the West at large, are pretty compressed. They're pretty congested. Teams are taking turns beating each other, and it is keeping everybody within punching distance other than Colorado. So to start out this conversation, I think it's important that we talk about where everybody is at right now. So we said before, the Oilers are on pace for 85 standings points. That would miss the playoffs. First place in the Pacific, the Anaheim Ducks, they're on pace for 106 points. The LA Kings, second, on pace for 102. The Vegas Golden Knights on pace for 98. The Seattle Kraken on pace for 96. The San Jose Sharks are on pace to finish with 85 points, the exact same amount as the Edmonton Oilers. In the Central, Colorado is on pace to set the record, 138 standings points. Dallas, second, 118 standings points. Most years, 118 points is good enough to win the President's Trophy. Colorado's playing so well, 118 points. 20 points back. That's how good Colorado's been. The Wild, 104-point pace. Then the Utah Hockey Club, also on pace like the Oilers, like the Sharks, for 85 standings points. So what we know is only what we can draw upon. So for me, I like to go back and look at the history. And over the last 5 years, the average wildcard team has finished with 96 standings points. 96 standings points would be a 68-point run here for the Oilers, who have recorded all of 27 standings points on the year. So 96 minus 27, 16 to something like that, 59, 69, something like that. My math is a little rough. I'm a journalist, not a mathematician. Right now, for the Oilers to get to that 96, 97 point threshold, they would need to have a 625 points percentage pace in the remaining regular season games they have left. So the Oilers are not in a dire situation as far as the standings go. But in terms of where they are at in the pecking order, in terms of where they are at in desperation, then I think it's a little more fair to say they have a lot to figure out. They are 5-4-1 in their last 10 games. They are not exactly stringing together competent hockey. They are not playing in a way that leads me to believe they are ramping up to a really good stretch run. Instead, more than anything, I feel like this is a really bad case of stop and start. This is a case where the Oilers win a game the way they did on Saturday against Seattle, where they played really well. They got a shutout out of Stuart Skinner. Everybody feels reasonably good about it. And then you have no indication that what you got so far is going to sustain, is going to carry over to the next game. It is a very night and day Frankenstein, Jekyll and Hyde type team where based on the day, you have no idea how the given game is going to play out. And we'll get to the Roslovic injury. We'll get to just how the pieces are fitting together. But based on where the Oilers were at coming into the season, on expectations, where they were at in terms of roster leverage, this first quarter of the season has been a matter of survival. The first quarter of the season, based on their expectations and what they have committed to this team, is unacceptable. The Oilers are supposed to be a Stanley Cup caliber team. Now, whether or not that was in alignment with the roster, that's a different conversation. We spent all my everydayers out there heard me July and August saying the Oilers do not have enough goal scorers. They are going to struggle to score. They are going to be relying on their defense and goaltending if they want to make anything happen for themselves this year. And so far, because they haven't scored enough, their defense has been put under the magnifying glass. And the defense at large, the underlying numbers are not terrible, but because they are in so many close games, one mistake swings the game. And when you're having bad luck the way the Oilers are, all it takes is one stinky goal going in to let that start to snowball. And that's why this feels so desperate, even though we're not that far along in the season. And mathematically, of those 8 teams that were in a playoff spot on American Thanksgiving, 2 of them should probably fall out. Now, whether you think that's Seattle, Minnesota, Utah, that's a different conversation. But for right now, the Oilers are on the outside looking in. The Oilers are in desperate need of a solid run of form of hockey. And it's not just for their confidence, it is to stay alive. And I keep saying it over and over again. It's getting late early out there. Yes, you still have plenty of games remaining on your schedule to turn this thing around. But if you keep adopting that mindset of, we'll get going, we have the talent, we can do it, you turn into the kid who's cramming in either final studies or the kid who's putting their project together the night before it's due. Now, as somebody who has lived that life in many different lifetimes in middle school, high school, college, professionally, I get it. Some people need that ticking clock in the background to get them to hunker down. They need that pressure to perform. Pressure is a privilege. And the Oilers showed you last year, after a really rough March and April, that they were capable of rising to the occasion and locking in. The problem here is the Oilers have not sustained themselves enough of a cushion. Last year, through the middle of January, they had a really great run of hockey from mid-November through mid-January, where they were one of the best teams in the entire NHL. They built themselves enough of a points cushion that they could afford to give veterans time down the stretch to heal up from injuries and push for the postseason. Right now, the Oilers are looking down the barrel of needing to grind out wins. And the sooner you figure out some of your problems and start racking up 3 out of every 5 the way you're going to need to if you would like to make the playoffs, the better. We are going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, I'm going to tell you why the Jack Roslovic injury really might have come at the worst possible time. When I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My focus, my energy, my mood, even my skin. That's why I've been using Drip Drop. It's doctor-developed hydration that keeps me running at full power no matter what my day looks like. Drip Drop isn't your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading brands using a science-backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro sports teams. I like using Drip Drop as part of my daily routine. I mix a packet in the morning with my water. I've been big on trying to get my mornings off to better starts. I'm trying not to use my phone when I first wake up, drinking a good 8 to 12 ounces of water to help get my brain going. And then I can go about starting my day. And as an added bonus, it tastes really good. It doesn't taste synthetic. It doesn't taste overly sugary. It enhances my water drinking experience. It is a secret weapon for staying sharp and energized through long days. Hydration has always been a non-negotiable for me. Take yours to the next level with Drip Drop. Right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 20% off. Stock up now for the winter bulk and keep your body and mind performing at their best with Drip Drop. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen of the day. And thank you so much for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So real quick, do have to fulfill our obligations. Start of the second segment. I'm happy they won a hockey game in a season that has felt like pulling teeth at times. Winning a hockey game, even if it's against the Seattle team that feels very fugazi as far as their record, where they're at in the standings, you still went out there, you won the game. Stu put together a shutout, and it's fickle. Goaltending is a ever-moving goalpost, an impossible moving target. But at the very least, you got one good game out of him. Maybe you can start to reconstruct his confidence to be a competent backup for whatever your eventual goaltending move becomes. So, as we continue our conversation here, we're going to pivot to talking about the Jack Roslovic injury. And number one, as most Oiler fans would tell you, the Oilers are not the most direct when it comes to injury recovery timetables. And some of that, I imagine, is managing expectations. I think there is a perception that when a team overestimates the injury recovery and the player comes back sooner than expected, there's a disappointment there. There is a concern there. I think by setting the timelines modest the way Chris Knobloch has, the Oilers are able to give the appearance of a team that is giving their guys a little bit of extra time to work themselves back from injury. We saw it at the end of last year, at the end of the regular season. Jake Wallman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, McDavid, a number of players were managing nagging injuries down the stretch of the regular season, and they were held out of the lineup. They were skipped out of games, in and out of the lineup, to give them opportunities to heal, to get as close to their best possible condition as they can. And it is simply a reality of professional hockey that players are going to get injured, that recovery times will fluctuate, and most importantly, you cannot account for injuries in the traditional sense. You cannot know when an accident is going to happen. And Roslovic blocking a shot, breaking/spraining something, that's an example of an injury you cannot account for. Strains, pulls, those types of injuries can to some degree be prevented. You can work on your conditioning, you work on your flexibility, you stay as hydrated as you can, you have your potassium, all those little things that go into being as physically prepared as you can to avoid the soft tissue injuries that become nagging issues. Now, things like tears, breaks, sprains, those are a bit more complicated. Those are generally the results of dynamic movement, where if you sprain your ACL, that's a result of something being extended too far and not something you can particularly account for, because more likely than not, you fell awkwardly, you landed awkwardly. But in the case of Roslovic, it's not hyperbole to say he was the Oilers' best offseason addition, even though he was signed the week the season started. So for context, he has 18 points in 10 games as an Oiler. He has been putting up really good numbers. And for the year, Jack Roslovic was on pace to record 64 standings points. 64 standings points, 18 points in 23 games, on pace for 29 goals in the regular season. For context, last year, Jeff Skinner recorded 29 points. And I want to say Victor Arvidsson was in that same type of ballpark where he was in the low 20s. So 27. So if you want to say Arvidsson at 27, Jeff Skinner at 29, that's about 60-ish, 60-ish. Roslovic by himself was on pace to eclipse both Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson combined this year. That was the type of production we accounted for all offseason. We said the Oilers lost Corey Perry, that's 18 goals. You lost Jeff Skinner, that's 15. Arvidsson, that's 15. Right there. And then I know Evander Kane didn't play in the regular season, but if he had, he would have had something in the ballpark of 15 to 20 goals. That's 50, 60 goals, right? 70 goals right there that went out the door in the offseason. And the Oilers replaced it with Savoy, with Ike Howard, two guys who no track record of NHL scoring. Replaced it with Jack Roslovic, who ultimately came in, but a player who only has one 20-goal season, with Trent Frederick, whose career average in goals to this point has been 12 to 13. And Roslovic hit the ground running, found a really nice synergy with Draisaitl. Effectively, the only line the Oilers have that is generating dangerous offense off of the rush and converting at a reasonably high rate. And something that jumped out to me while I was doing the research and putting this together, in Jack Roslovic's minutes this year, 52% of the scoring chances, 55% of the shots on goal, 56% of the goals, 48% of the expected goals, and then 44% of the high danger chances. So what that tells me about Roslovic is that generally speaking, their offense comes off of the rush, and they do not get a particularly large share of the overall offense, that there are times where Roslovic and Leon are going to get pinned in their own zone, that they are going to get burned going back the other way. And that number is generally in line with what we see for those high-end offensive players who live a bit more in transition, because they are so inclined to creating dangerous offense that they are afforded the opportunity to be picky, to choose when to shoot, to not shoot. It creates a cycle where they end up with 3 or 4 players in tight on the net, and then the puck goes back the other way, and they're not able to get back, and they get burns going the other way. So that's why I think the expected goal and the high danger share not being in alignment with the actual goal results is interesting. And then real quick, as far as solutions, I think you probably see Ike Howard back sooner rather than later. He's put up 7 points in 5 games down in the AHL. We know, by and large, the reason he leveraged his way out of Tampa Bay was the fact he felt he was ready to play in the NHL, and Tampa Bay wasn't prepared to give him such opportunity. I think the Oilers were very reticent to give him a lot of responsibility out of the gate. You saw Chris Knoblauch fade him over time, begin to push him down the pecking order, and ultimately being optioned to the AHL. Not needing to clear waivers made it easier to do that, just from a pure logistical standpoint. If you don't need to put someone on waivers, you can send the young guy down. He can play 18, 19 minutes per game for 2-3 weeks in the A, and then you reassess. Now, we got to be candid here. The Oilers do not have enough offense. Without Howard, without Roslovic, and with Howard, there are going to be mistakes. There are going to be growing pains. And the Oilers are not in a position where they can afford to be patient. And you can be patient until you can't. And patience is a virtue until you are actively harming yourself by waiting because you are too scared to make a mistake. I think Howard is realistically your only solution. I suppose you could do David Tomaszek, but I think Tomaszek's 4 points in 18 games speak to a player who's not really prepared for the speed, the positioning. And that's not to say that can't come along with more time, but I don't think the Oilers are in a position where they can afford to wait for Tomaszek to figure it out. So I do think Howard will ultimately end up being the short-term beneficiary of the situation. I don't think Roslovic will only miss 2 weeks. I think the Oilers are definitely underselling it there. I think the Oilers over the course of the year generally have been underselling injury timetables and giving guys time to return on a reasonable pace. We are going to take our second break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, I'm going to tell you why, even though Connor Clattenburg has only played 25 minutes across 3 games, I like what I've seen from the kid, and there's an argument he should be sticking around. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything is different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is when a game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or a momentum flipping turnover. FanDuel lets you jump live into the moment with live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly after every play, player props that update as players heat up. You can bet on next touchdown scorers, drive results, totals, and even more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, and every possibility. Tonight, Monday Night Football, my New York Giants going up to New England and Foxborough to take on Drake May and the Patriots. Jackson Dart is expected to return to the lineup for the Giants. The Patriots are 7.5-point favorites. The over-under for the game is 46.5. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you so much to everyone that is hanging out on this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers, making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we've got your team covered every single day. Continuing our conversation and moving along, I am not big on the AHL call-up to spark the team. I think that puts too much of a responsibility on someone who doesn't have the facilities to change circumstances to be the catalyst for change. I think for a week or two, it's a nice story. Everybody's excited for the kid. Fans, teammates, even the coaches are allowed to be a little optimistic. You start to talk yourself into narratives and ideas. The mystery box, you think about that episode of Family Guy where Peter is offered the boat or the mystery box, and he says, well, the mystery box could have anything. It could even have a boat. And that's kind of the situation here. I don't think Connor Clattenburg is your Zach Hyman replacement down the road. I think he is a short-term solution to a fundamental problem. I don't think his energy alone is enough to facilitate large-scale change of the Oilers, and that's why I generally am not a huge believer in the AHL call-up for the depth guy, the grinder, the fighter. But I do think Clattenburg has shown you he's a passable hockey player at the NHL level. Now, I really want to emphasize, these numbers need to be taken with a massive grain of salt. He has played 25 minutes and 1 second of even strength hockey through 3 NHL games. In those 25 minutes, the Oilers have 56% of the scoring chances, 59% of the shots on goal, 100% of the goals, 1-0, 73.5% of the expected goals, 85.7% of the high danger chances, on 7.69 shooting, and then 100% save percentage, obviously, because he's yet to be on the ice for a goal against. This type of result through 3 games in 25 minutes is a solid start. Now, we get to game 10, and these numbers are still trending in this direction. Then we have a real conversation about maybe this guy's ready to be a third liner. But through 3 games as a fourth liner who does not play a lot, those underlying numbers, in conjunction with the energy he brings to the lineup on game day, is a reasonable gamble. And candidly, when you are in a situation the way the Oilers are, where you need anything to break right, any modicum of good luck to spur some type of change, you got to be excited. Because a guy like this, and I talk about this a lot in regards to the postseason, but I think in the case of a short-term call-up is true as well. This is the type of guy who doesn't understand he's not supposed to be this momentum swinger. And we talk a lot about dumb luck, the idea of being in the right place at the right time, taking advantage of a situation, and not knowing any better. But one of the benefits of bringing a guy up from the AHL to the NHL is he hasn't been around the team for whatever's gone wrong to inspire his call-up. I know it's a little different. The Oilers have had injuries as well, and that's why the lineup spot is there for him. But this guy has not been in the slog for the first 6-7 weeks of this season where the Oilers have largely struggled. Him dropping in at this point is giving a shot in the arm. It is a short-term solution to a long-term problem. Clattenburg can jump in. He can throw his body around. He can instigate some fights, score the odd goal, which he picked up his first NHL goal, which is great. You love to see that. Anybody who makes it to the NHL is infinitely more accomplished in their fields than 99% of the people in whatever field you happen to be working in. So that's an accomplishment. But when we're dealing with large scale issues, these type of short-term solutions buy you time. And this is something to be encouraged about, that this kid has come up a little bit earlier than expected in his development timeline. He's really young. He doesn't have a ton of professional hockey experience. He has shown he is not a liability. He has shown that, and granted, in extremely limited minutes, he can be a passable NHL player. He has energy. The guys on the team get fired up by the way he plays. All of that stuff is valuable when we are talking about getting out of a funk. This is the equivalent of buying a new outfit to start going to the gym again. This is the equivalent of buying exercise equipment to start working out at home. Whatever philosophical or habit changing idea you need, whatever that looks like in your mind, if that's buying a new book to start reading, all of those are examples of trying to get out of a funk, trying to jumpstart a stagnant situation. I think Clattenburg has an opportunity to play himself into the conversation. And because the Oilers are cap strapped, there is a world where you could end up with maybe Janmark going out, maybe another player who makes a little bit more money going out. And Clattenburg, by virtue of being an energy guy, a vibes guy, and being a passable hockey player, that's an opportunity for the Oilers to save a little bit of money against the cap and maybe upgrade somewhere else. And then, most importantly, on an individual basis, just talking about Clattenburg himself, force the Oilers' hand. Even if you're only getting 7-8 minutes a night, you keep playing well, force them to send you down even though you're playing well. See if you get a groundswell of support. See if you can get the fan base on your side. And we talk about it a lot. General managers, coaches, they need to have a certain baseline level of credibility for the decisions they make. If Clattenburg comes up here, he fights, he plays well, he gets on the stat sheet every 5 to 10 games with the secondary assist, the odd goal, all of that is building a credible case for him to be an NHL player. Now, I'm not saying he's a long-term piece, whatever, but he continues to play reasonably well. He gives you energy. He throws his body around. He is unwilling to accept the status quo that the Oilers at large have been about so far this season. All of those traits are good. All of those mentality situations are good in addressing what is not working. Now, we'll wrap up on this thought. I don't think this kid is anything particularly special, but I think Connor Clattenburg has shown with the right attitude and the right mentality, you can build yourself some credibility. You can build yourself an opportunity. And most importantly, you buy yourself time. There are a lot of guys on this team, whether it's Trent Frederick, whether it's a Matthias Janmark, whatever player you think of when I say build some credibility, that's the example. What Clattenburg is doing, forechecking aggressively, throwing hits, finishing your checks, all of those are examples of, even if the puck's not going in for you, your offense isn't coming around, there are still opportunities to impact the game. It's just a matter of the willingness to go out there and actually do it. That will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much to everyone that made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network, where we've got your team covered every single day. Be sure to check out Locked On NHL Game Night, where the guys are breaking down every game every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned in June. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.